The charity gala had a dress code, black tie. Which meant the kind of room where the watches cost more than cars and the shoes more than a month's rent for most people in the city outside. The kind of room where you could feel the money without touching it, in the way people held their drinks, in the particular confident ease of those who had never had to count anything. The event was held in a ballroom in downtown Chicago. It benefited a children's hospital. The tickets were $2,000 each. There were 200 guests. A man named Arthur sat at table 14. He was 71 years old. He wore a suit that was clean and well-pressed but clearly not new, the kind of suit that fits well because it has been worn to exactly the right shape over many years. His shoes were polished but showed age at the edges. His watch was modest. He had come alone. No one greeted him at the door with the particular warmth reserved for significant donors. No one flagged his arrival to the event coordinator. He found his table himself, sat down, and read the printed program while the room filled around him. The man to his left was a real estate developer named Marcus who had made his money in the 90s and was still making more. He glanced at Arthur once and then turned to speak to someone else. The woman to his right spent the first course with her back slightly angled away, in conversation with her husband. Arthur read his program. He ate the salad when it came. He watched the room. He was the wealthiest person present. By a considerable distance, nobody knew. Arthur Finch had been born in 1953 in a small town in rural Indiana. His father had run a hardware store. His mother had taught elementary school for 31 years. They were not poor, they were the specific American kind of comfortable that means you have enough and never much more, and you understand the value of what you have because you have always been able to feel its edges. Arthur had worked in the hardware store from the time he was 12. He had learned, in those years, something that no business school teaches in quite the same way, that what people need is rarely glamorous, that the work of providing it is honorable, and that the person who does it with consistency and without complaint is worth more than they are usually told they are. He had studied engineering at a state university on a partial scholarship and part-time work. He had graduated, found a job, and within 6 years started a small manufacturing company that made industrial components, the kind of thing that goes inside other things and makes them work, the kind of thing no one thinks about until it fails. The company had grown slowly and then faster and then in a way that required him to hire people with spreadsheets to track the numbers because the numbers had become more than one person could hold. He had sold the company 19 years ago. The amount he had received was not public. He had structured it that way deliberately. He had then invested that amount with the same careful, unglamorous discipline with which he had built the company, and the investments had grown in the way that patient, consistent investments grow when left alone for long enough. He was, by any honest accounting, extraordinarily wealthy. He lived in a 4-bedroom house in a quiet suburb. He drove a 9-year-old sedan. He ate at diners and occasionally at better restaurants and could not reliably remember which was which because he had never found the food in expensive restaurants to be proportionally better. He had been attending this gala for 6 years. He gave a specific amount each year. He had never told anyone what that amount was. The man beside him, Marcus, eventually ran out of conversation with the people on his other side and turned to Arthur during the second course. "What brings you here tonight?" Marcus asked. The question had the slightly disengaged quality of someone performing social duty. "I support the hospital," Arthur said. "Good cause," Marcus said. "You involved with them professionally?" "No," Arthur said. "I just think children's hospitals matter." Marcus nodded and reached for his wine. "What do you do?" "I'm retired," Arthur said. "What from?" "Manufacturing." Marcus's expression shifted in the small, almost invisible way that faces shift when they receive insufficient information. Manufacturing was too broad. It provided no useful data point for the calculation happening behind his eyes, which was the calculation that rooms like this one always prompted. Who is this person? What are they worth? What category do they belong in? Arthur did not offer more. Which sector? Marcus asked. Industrial components, Arthur said. Nothing interesting to talk about. Marcus accepted this. He moved the conversation briefly to the wine, then to a real estate project in the West Loop he was working on, then back to the people on his other side. Arthur ate his dinner. He had had this conversation, or versions of it, many times. It had stopped bothering him years ago. In fact, he had come to find it instructive, to watch how quickly the room reorganized its attention based on visible signals, and to appreciate what could be learned from being invisible to it. The speeches began after dinner. The president of the hospital foundation, a woman named Dr. Chen, spoke first. She described the work the hospital did, the number of children treated annually, the specific programs that donor funding made possible. She was clear and passionate and did not use unnecessary words. Arthur paid close attention. He had visited the hospital twice without announcing himself. He had walked the pediatric oncology ward. He had sat in a waiting room and watched families, parents with the specific exhausted vigilance of people who have been managing fear for a long time. He had talked to a nurse who didn't know who he was and who had described the ward's needs with the focused precision of someone who lived inside those needs daily. The donation he had been making each year was significant. The one he was considering for this year was larger. But he had not decided yet. He was listening. Dr. Chen introduced 3 families whose children had been treated at the hospital. Each family had a story. They told them directly, without performing them, which was the kind of telling Arthur found most convincing. The 3rd family was a young couple, early 30s, a son who had been diagnosed at age 4 and was now 7 and in the room with them, sitting in a chair that was too big for him, legs dangling, looking at the chandeliers. The father spoke. He talked about the night of the diagnosis and the particular terror of not knowing and the way the hospital staff had met them in that terror with competence and humanity. He talked about the nurses who remembered his son's name. The doctor who called them on her own time because she knew they were anxious. The social worker who helped them navigate the insurance process so they could focus on their child. Arthur listened. The boy on the chair was looking at the chandeliers. Arthur made his decision. The event had a silent auction and an opportunity for pledges. Most of the pledging happened in conversations at tables, between people who knew each other and had arranged their giving in advance. It was a social performance as much as a charitable act, which Arthur understood without judging. People were moved by different things. The social currency of giving was still giving. The pledge cards were collected by volunteers moving through the room. Arthur filled out his quietly. He folded it and handed it to the young woman who came by. She thanked him and moved to the next table. He got up to get more water from the service table near the wall. On his way back, he passed the family who had spoken. The parents were talking to Dr. Chen, and the 7-year-old boy was now standing near the floral centerpiece on a side table, examining a large white flower with the concentrated attention of someone who has decided this is the most interesting thing currently available. Arthur stopped. "That's a gardenia," he said. The boy looked up at him. "Is it soft?" "Touch it gently," Arthur said. The boy touched the petal with one finger. "It is soft," he said, with the tone of someone recording a confirmed hypothesis. "They smell good too," Arthur said. "If you lean in." The boy leaned in. His eyes widened slightly. "It does." His mother appeared beside him. "Eli, don't touch the flowers." She looked at Arthur. "I'm sorry." "He didn't damage anything," Arthur said. He was very gentle. She smiled, the tired, genuine smile of a parent who is always half-managing. "Thank you for being patient." "He's curious," Arthur said. "That's a good thing to be." She looked at her son. "It really is," she said. And the way she said it carried more weight than the words. Arthur returned to table 14. The dessert had come in his absence. He ate it and watched the room continue its choreography, the network building, the deal adjacency, the particular social work of being seen by the right people in the right light. Marcus was deep in conversation with someone who had just arrived at the table, a man in a better suit with a firmer handshake who was clearly from a category that Marcus found more worth his attention. Arthur did not mind. He had spent decades in rooms like this one and had long since stopped requiring them to see him. What he had found, over those decades, was that the invisibility had a quality to it that became almost pleasurable over time. You could observe without being observed. You could decide without being lobbied. You could give without being performed to. He thought about the boy with the gardenia. He thought about the nurse in the oncology ward who had talked to him for 30 minutes without knowing his name or his net worth, who had described the ward's equipment needs with the specific frustration of someone who had been asking for upgrades for 2 years. He thought about Dr. Chen's speech and the particular program she had described and the line she had used, "What children in crisis need most is the certainty that someone is coming." That line had stayed with him. He had grown up with a father who fixed broken things and a mother who taught children to read. Both of them had understood something that Arthur had spent his whole life trying to practice, that what you did with what you had was the whole measure of a person. After the formal program ended, the room broke into its various conversations again. Dr. Chen was moving between tables, thanking guests. She reached table 14 and worked her way around it, shaking hands, using names she clearly remembered. When she reached Arthur, she shook his hand and said his name. Marcus, who was still at the table, looked up at the sound of it. "Mr. Finch," Dr. Chen said. "Thank you for being here again." "Again?" Marcus said. "Arthur has been coming for 6 years," Dr. Chen said. She said it simply, without performance. "I didn't know you knew the hospital well," Marcus said to Arthur. "He's one of our most significant supporters," Dr. Chen said. She paused, and something in her expression suggested she had said more than she had intended to. She looked at Arthur. Arthur smiled slightly. "I'm a supporter," he said. "That's the right word." Dr. Chen moved on. Marcus looked at Arthur with the recalibrated attention of someone who has received new data. "How significant?" Marcus asked. "Significant enough," Arthur said. "Why didn't you say so?" Arthur considered the question honestly. "Because I wasn't here to say so," he said. "I was here to listen to the speeches and eat the dinner and make sure the foundation knows someone is paying attention." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "That's an unusual approach." "Maybe," Arthur said. "I've found it works better for me than the alternative." 2 days after the gala, Dr. Chen received the pledge confirmation from the Foundation's processing team. She read the number. She read it again. She called Arthur. He answered on the 3rd ring. She told him what the pledge would make possible, specific things, concrete things. The equipment upgrade for the oncology ward that had been on the need list for 2 years. A new position for a social worker to support families through the financial navigation of treatment. A renovation of the family waiting areas, which were functional but worn in the way of rooms that see a great deal of human difficulty and need to be made more worthy of that difficulty. She told him these things carefully because she knew he would want specifics rather than general expressions of gratitude. She was right. He asked questions. About the equipment timeline. About the social worker position and how it would be structured. About the waiting area renovation and whether families had been consulted on what would actually help. She answered all of them. Some she had to follow up on. When they were done, she said, "Mr. Finch. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why have you been doing this quietly for 6 years? You could have a wing named after you. You could have a significant public presence associated with the hospital. That opens other doors. It brings in other donors." Arthur was quiet for a moment. "The children in that ward," he said, "don't benefit from a wing named after me. They benefit from better equipment and more social workers and waiting rooms that feel like someone cares. The naming is for the people who need to see it. I don't need to see it." Dr. Chen said nothing for a moment. "You know," she said finally, "you're the only person who's ever said that to me in 30 years of fundraising." "Then I hope someone else says it to you eventually," Arthur said. "It shouldn't be unusual." Arthur did one more thing that week. He found the family from the gala, Eli's family. Dr. Chen helped him, with the family's permission, to make contact through the hospital's patient liaison office. He did not want to give them money directly. He had learned, over the years, that direct financial gifts to individuals required care. They could help and they could also complicate, depending on the circumstances and the way they were offered. What he did instead was connect them with the hospital's financial support program, which he had been quietly funding for 3 years, and ensure that their access to it was immediate and full. He asked the social work team to make contact within the week. He also sent a letter to Eli's parents. Not a formal letter, a real one, handwritten, 2 paragraphs. He said he had met their son at the gala and that Eli's curiosity about the gardenia had been the best moment of his evening. He said he thought children who leaned in to smell flowers were the right kind of children. He said he hoped Eli's treatment continued to go well. He did not sign it with his full name. He signed it Arthur, from table 14. He did not know if they would know what to make of it. He sent it anyway. He received a card 2 weeks later from Eli's mother. It had a drawing on the front, a child's drawing, clearly done by Eli, of a flower. Inside, his mother had written, "Eli wanted me to tell you that gardenias are his favorite now." Arthur put the card on the shelf in his study. He looked at it when he needed reminding of why he did things the way he did them. The following year's gala had a new item in the printed program. At the bottom of the donor recognition page, below the long list of names arranged by giving level, there was a small paragraph Dr. Chen had added. It was not a name. It was a sentence. This hospital is also supported by those who give not to be seen, but because giving is what they believe wealth is for. We are grateful to them in ways we cannot fully express. She had not discussed this with Arthur in advance. She had simply done it. He called her when he read it. "You didn't need to do that," he said. "I know," she said. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for the room. I wanted the people at the gala to read something true about money and decide what to do with it." Arthur thought about that. "Did it work?" he asked. "We had 7 new major donors this year," she said. 2 of them specifically mentioned that paragraph. He was quiet for a moment. "Good," he said. He attended the gala again. He sat at table 14. He wore the same suit, now 1 year more worn at the edges, fitting him 1 year more perfectly. Marcus was there again. They shook hands at the beginning of the evening. Marcus said, "I think about what you said last year." "What part?" Arthur asked. "About being here to listen. About not needing to be seen." Arthur waited. "I changed how I gave this year," Marcus said. "Less publicly. More specifically." He looked at his drink. It felt different. Better. Arthur nodded. "It usually does." The speeches began. The room settled. The boy who had smelled the gardenia was not there this year. He was at home, healthy, finishing 2nd grade. His parents had sent a note to the hospital foundation that Dr. Chen had read at a staff meeting. It said, "Eli has decided he wants to be a doctor when he grows up. We wanted you to know that." Arthur didn't know this yet. He would read it in the hospital newsletter that arrived in his mailbox 2 weeks later. But he sat at table 14 in his well-worn suit with his modest watch and his 9-year-old sedan in the parking garage outside, and he listened to Dr. Chen speak about what the year's giving had made possible, the equipment, the social worker, the renovated waiting rooms, and he ate the salad when it came and watched the room and felt, in the specific way of someone who has been doing the right thing quietly for long enough, something that required no audience to be real. The wealthiest man in the room sat at table 14 and nobody noticed. That was exactly how he had planned it. That was exactly why it worked.